Beautiful. Okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, new thing we started doing last year is just record each meetup, put it on our YouTube channel. I think we've done the last two or three, can't remember how many, but it's always useful for people that can't attend. So as always, just a small introduction, some announcements. Yeah, so first of all, thanks to the sponsor, so Cover Genius company where I work as well, which happens to be in this office. Thanks for the sponsorship of the venue and meetup. Um, Unfortunately, we're not hiring now, although we almost were hiring, kind of. But in any way, if you're, I don't know, if you're in mid or senior level, let me know anyway. And next time we're hiring, at least I know. So if you're, I don't know, new to this meetup and you're looking for a job, yeah, just speak to me afterwards. Call for speakers. So as always, I guess I've already had a couple of people volunteer talks, which is really great. The next meetup will be in April. So if you are keen to prepare a talk in April, could be 20 minutes, could be 40 minutes, probably not 1 hour. But if you're keen to do a talk, let me know as well, or message me on Slack. Yeah, next meetup probably in April. Scheduled tonight. So tonight shouldn't be very long. We just have one talk, which is hopefully not going to be too long. It's just a bit of a wrap from LaraconEU, which happened 2 weeks ago, I want to say. Yeah. So in terms of announcements, yeah, last year was quite good. We had 5 events. I think we had the most attendance kind of around the middle of the year, which I guess kind of makes sense. There's not a lot of people off. And then at the start and at the end of the year, it's probably like tapers off. So yeah, this year we're kind of hoping to build on that, maybe have at least as many events, maybe even more. So if we do bi-monthly, potentially we can have 6 events, so once every 2 months. We also had Co-Talent sponsor us, and I guess you can say our sister or brother meetup, Sydney Django. Unfortunately, the company Co-Talent, they kind of, I don't know, had some restructuring. So those people that organized that were let go. Consequently, they're no longer sponsoring us. Well, it happens. But yeah, on the other hand, so I'm going to try and find perhaps new sponsors, because the more sponsorships we have, the more meetups we can have. But probably more than that, it would be good to just find more speakers from more different companies. So there's some really obvious things we can do, which is reach out to the companies that used to host the meetup prior to COVID, which there's a few of them. So I've already started doing that. So it would even be ideal, I think, to rotate the meetup around each of those offices. They're all kind of in Sydney, in the city anyway. Yeah, so I don't know, stay tuned for that. There's also some developments with Laravel. So they themselves are also kind of want to contribute more to the community, since they've raised a whole bunch of money. They want to kind of sponsor meetups a little bit. I'll talk more about that later, but that's kind of like a positive development. And also, yeah, we're gonna probably move away from meetup.com by the end of this year, hopefully. So maybe if there's one thing while I'm speaking, if you want to do, scan that QR code there, or alternatively, just go to that link. So essentially, a whole bunch of the Australian PHP groups are creating their event group on this new website called Eventy. And I think it's made by the Eventbrite people. And I think it's meant to be kind of a competitor to the meetup.com. Yeah, so why move away from meetup.com? So essentially, they've been raising their organizer fees quite dramatically. So I think it's like over $1,000 AUD a year just to host up to 3 meetups. And then also, I think recently they've also even starting people, like anybody, like if you just want to join a meetup, if you want to RSVP to an event, when you register, it asks you to go on like a paid plan, asks you for your credit card information. Even though you can opt out of it, like you can, I think somebody told me you can sign up for a trial and then you can just cancel it. It just seems like overly complicated, and like obviously nobody wants to sign up to something where you're being asked your credit card information. So just the feeling in the kind of meetup organizer community is that meetup is kind of going downhill a bit. Consequently, we want to find other alternatives. And yeah, there's also this new PHP X thing, which I might actually, yeah. This is the last slide. So PHPX is a very, very new initiative by some guy whose name I can't remember, not Sydney. Essentially, it's like a one central website, and it's meant to help with discoverability of PHP meetups, right? So it's kind of like this new website. I might just shut these blinds because of the sun. But it's a central website which links to every meetup, every PHP or Laravel meetup anywhere around the world. And it's just been live for like the last, I think, 2 or 3 months. And yeah, already a lot of people have added their meetups to it. So in terms of Australia, yeah, I've added ours actually last night. The way it works is it's like a GitHub, and you can add the details. It'll automatically create your website like this. I think one of the reasons for this as well is they also see the problems with Meetup.com, and they want a better way to organize and have people discover PHP meetups. So there's a whole bunch of them are added already, but there's still many that are not added. Like, for example, there's meetups in Melbourne, in Brisbane, so they have to add theirs. I'm sure there's more around the world. But yeah, anyway, this is like kind of an interesting development. In terms of moving away from Meetup.com, I think the biggest issue is the discoverability issue. And this is what Eventy looks like. So if you want to sign up, I've already posted the next event, which is April. Would be great if you RSVP'd there. So if you move on to using that instead of Meetup.com. But anyway, so it's a little bit of a housekeeping announcement, but like you're gonna see this change progress throughout the year. Any questions on that? Not too confusing, I hope. Cool. All right, so oops, go to the front. So this presentation is basically about LaraconEU. So there's 3 major Laracon conferences. There's the regional Laracon US. There's LaraconEU, typically happens in Amsterdam. And then, yeah, there's also LaraconEU, which is great. It's now happening in Brisbane, previously happening in Sydney. Yeah, so this is me, this guy. So I was at LaraconEU a few weeks ago. It was quite a cool conference. And basically, I just want to give you like a summary of whatever useful things, things that I found useful or impactful at that conference. Whatever I like the most. Obviously, there's like a whole bunch of talks. It's not like you can perfectly summarize every single talk on a slide or a few slides. So they will eventually make the videos public. Actually, already I think they have the live stream public, but it's just a little bit, it's not very convenient to watch because it has a lot of like dead time, which is intermission between talks, and it's not like timestamp. But if you're really, really keen, you could watch that. Otherwise, if you wait like maybe like a month or 2, I'm sure they will release the individual talk videos as well. Cool. So yeah, without any delay, let's dive into it. So it's basically 2 days of talks. I'm just going to try and summarize it as quickly as I can. So the first talk was about this Laravel pipeline pattern. It's actually quite interesting because I kind of read an article about this really, really long time ago, like many years ago, and we kind of used it in a couple of places in our products, but haven't really used it much since, and I wasn't really sure. I don't know, is it still something that's being used or not or whatever else? But then there was this talk about it, which was actually really interesting, because actually quite a lot of interesting developments have happened since Laravel first released it. And yeah, if you're not sure, like what is the pipeline pattern, the really, really simple example is basically if you have an object and you want to take it through a series of steps and then do something at the end, the pipeline pattern is built for that. So the most classic use case is the Laravel HTTP kernel, right? So you might might have a request, and you might want to take it through a series of middleware. Maybe you want to take it through, substitute bindings or add bindings or whatever else, load models for the controller. That's all done through the pipeline pattern. There's other examples in Laravel as well. So I think jobs get executed in a similar way now because it's job middleware. Yeah, but so this speaker, he gave many different examples of what you can use it for. So for example, you can use it as a kind of like a survey tool or a form builder. So if you want to collect information from your users or customers or whatever else, you want to have a list of questions you want to answer, the user to answer. If you have a list of things to do in a router controller method, so that might be an alternative to something like services or service-oriented architecture, that instead inside of the controller you have a pipeline of steps, like let's say 10 things that you want to do in that controller route, right? Is that a good idea or not? I'm not sure. It sounds a little bit funky, but yeah, I guess it's a way to segment different steps that you need to take. The next one I found really interesting as well is health checks. The reason I find it interesting is because I feel like we kind of have this problem now. I mean, it's not a massive problem, but it's, in production, you want to do a lot of things in your health check, and you might want to check many aspects of your service that might just not exist locally, or they might be faked or something like that. But in production, it might be like, a real thing that's there, and you need to check it. So yeah, one of the really good things about the pipeline pattern is that you can actually mix it with other patterns. So for example, there's some new patterns like the action pattern. There's also enums, which is like relatively recent in PHP. And you can combine it with these things. So for example, you can have an enum, which set out what are the steps to take in the pipeline. So for instance, you might have a pipeline for your local environment. So you can use that for your unit test and whatever else. You can have a pipeline for your production environment. You can have a pipeline for your staging environment. Why? Because you might not have the same services or infrastructure available in each environment. So inherently, you're going to want to check different things in different environments. And that I found to be really useful. Yeah, or different pipes. So for example, let's say in here we have 3 steps. This is probably not the best example to generate to demonstrate the point, but imagine, you have a production environment, you have a staging environment. Let's say you have almost the same, but a different set of steps. Because essentially this is just an array, right? It's an array of pipes that you're passing through the pipeline. And you can have different arrays of classes, right? And that's what you can easily store with enums. So and each class as well, you can just have it as an action class, right? So an action pattern class. So you can like combine the action pattern with enums, with the pipeline pattern. And it's actually quite a powerful way to segregate functionality, define functionality like in different use cases, and then run it really cleanly. And yeah, obviously, like when the pipeline initially was created in Laravel, it was many, many, many years ago. Neither of the other 2 things really existed, but yeah, now I feel like it's even more powerful because you can interact with these other patterns. But yeah, so also you can apply filters to a query builder. This also I think is a pretty good use case. So for example, in our case, like I can think of one of our projects. There's like a query builder for the select everything in a certain endpoint. So I don't know. Let's say select all users, for example. It's not that example, but as an example, and you might want to apply many different query parameters. Like I don't know. You want users in this team. You want users having this permission. You want users of a certain height or whatever else, age. There might be a lot of things. Yes, and we have one use case where like that query builder function is massive. It's like 200 lines or something. And yeah, I think it probably could be rewritten in this way, and it probably would be cleaner. So rather than having all of your SQL not SQL, but eloquent conditionals there in one step, you can just say, okay, I want to add this thing, I want to add this relation, I want to add this filter, whatever else, and you can do it all in a pipeline. So I think that's a pretty good idea as well. But the ultimate goal is just to break down complex problems. So if you have like a really complex problem, and you want to break it down, and you're not sure even how to break it down, because you could just use an action pattern, and you can just call a whole bunch of action classes. But then, it's probably like a little bit messy. So with the pipeline, it's like a really nice, clean way to do it. Gives you an interface of what a pipe should look like. So it's more readable, more maintainable. Cool. Embeddings. Okay, this is a little bit interesting. Does anybody do LLM development at all? Yeah, a little bit. might sound like black magic. Okay, so as you may not know, like one of the classic funny things about LLMs is that if you ask a LLM, if you take a funny word like, I don't know, mongoose, right? Something like that, and you say, how many O's does it have or how many G's does it have? Quite often it can't answer that kind of thing properly. I mean, now they probably can because everybody made such a meme out of it, but even like just a month ago, that used to be like a really big thing. Like LLMs couldn't tell you how many letters were in a word. You might think, why is that the case? Well, the reason is because LLMs, they don't work with characters or strings, they work with vectors, right? So every single word, every single piece of text, let's say, they break up into tokens, and each token represents a kind of like a vector. And even like one word could be broken up into multiple tokens. So it gets a little bit complicated. But that's what embeddings is, right? Embeddings is a way of breaking up a piece of text into vectors to use for other things like LLMs. Now, interestingly, so it's kind of like it's an infrastructure of LLMs, if you will. It's not the LLM itself, it's not like the engine, but it's an infrastructure thing. It's a way to break up text into tokens. Interestingly, for example, OpenAPI, and I suspect others as well, they have APIs where you can send it a blob of text as big as you like, and it'll give you the vectors for that blob of text. Now, why is it important? Basically, they're exposing a piece of their infrastructure to you, so you can use it however you like. Like, for example, let's say you have, I'll use this as an example. Let's say you work at like a small college or something, a TAFE or something like that, and you want to build your own plagiarism detector. How do you build it? You know, maybe you don't want to pay for the expensive off-the-shelf tools. So you can basically take each student's assignment, could be, I don't know, could be a written assignment in English, could be code, I don't think it really matters. So you take those assignments, pass it to the OpenAPI embeddings API, it'll return you a whole bunch of vectors. What do you do with the vectors? You can store them in your own database, right? And so the speaker said Postgres is actually probably the best database to store vectors. The reason is that Postgres has a really good vector extension. And then using that, you can actually do vector operations in Postgres, which is very, very fast. Yeah, so you can store the vectors in Postgres. Once you have that, what do you do? Well, you can have a whole bunch of operations, right? You can run, for example, you can find similarities. So given two different pieces of text, what's the similarity? You can find clustering. So for example, you have a, I don't know, piece of text, like an essay, and you want to do like a cluster word map, like what kinds of words or phrases are used the most in this piece of text. You can classify it. Yeah, you can classify different parts of it into different kinds of text. You can do nearest neighbor search. So for example, you want to find, it's kind of like full text search, but instead of finding the piece of text, you want to find all the text around it. So all of these kind of operations are really, really, really fast in the vector database. And I'm talking like you can have entire books, right? You can have books and books, and it will be like instant because it's not searching by text, but it's searching by these vectors in the vector database. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Obviously, it's not a use case everybody has, but if you do have a use case where you're dealing with a lot of text-based inputs, it can be good. Why? Because all of these things you can do yourself in your own infrastructure. So you don't have to use any LLM. You don't have to use any API, any service. You don't have to pay for anything expensive. You can actually do it all yourself, which is probably the thing I found most interesting. So I don't know how much sense that makes, but it was quite an interesting talk. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Cool. All right, code quality, static analysis. So this is like a general talk about increasing the code quality in your product. So yeah, there's different levels of checking. I have a few slides on this next. But yeah, the important thing is like, don't stress about how much checking you're doing in terms of your code quality. The important thing is to make a start and then also figure out, between you and the team, like what works best for you. Yeah, there's a lot of different tools. Like these two tools are basically static analysis checking. So PHP Sten and Psalm, I'm sure most people have heard of them. Static analysis, like why is it really good? So essentially, code coverage. Everybody tries to get a high amount of code coverage, but 100% code coverage is generally not worth it. Why? Because it's a huge time investment, and we just generally care about the happy path. We want to make sure that happy path works. So what do you do about the remaining percentage of code coverage that you don't have, like every single edge case? It's very, very laborious to write unit tests for. Like it takes a lot of time, and the reward might not be much. But static analysis is actually a really good complement to unit testing to help you find and avoid this kind of edge cases. So that's one thing that adds a lot of value about static analysis. Yeah, and customization. So basically, there's not like a one correct way to do things, but I think the emphasis from the speaker here was that teams can each decide, whatever rules and conventions work for them, and then once they do decide or as they change, they can enforce them through the tooling. So yeah, what are some examples? So there's kind of like mild code quality tools. What does it mean mild? It means they're not very painful, right? They're very easy to implement. They don't really involve a lot of arguing with people. They're easy to use. They're like fairly painless. So like, yeah, syntax checking. PHP basically does that out of the box. So lines of code. So I don't know, is this function too big? Is this line of code too long? Documentation generators from the code. And then you have like medium quality, not quality, but medium level quality control tools. So these tools, they're still like mostly painless, like linters, formatters, easy mode on PHP stand-up Psalm. They're still not that difficult to set up. They still don't introduce too much friction, but yeah, you might fret a little bit over some of the rules. You think, okay, do I want this or do I want that? What's the definition of a big function? Is it 50 lines, 80 lines, 120 lines, whatever? So there's a little bit of decision making that has to happen, but it's still not too bad. Like you can decide these things. Once you decide, you can implement them. It's not such a big deal. And then you have the hot or spicy, right? So this is the hardest level of code quality control. Is if you put like the code quality tools and static analysis tools on the highest possible settings, because you're basically kind of asking them to dictate to you their opinions on what constitutes quality code. And anytime you do that, of course, it's bound to be a little bit controversial. And yeah, it could lead to arguing, could be very painful. Typically, you have to spend a lot of time fixing errors, fixing code quality control errors, rather than actually writing code and adding value. So there's a lot of friction. So, what's the point here? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? So I think the point is, it is something that introduces a lot of friction. Whether you do use it or not, like at that highest level, it's really up to you. It depends on what your goal is, what is your motivation. And yeah, shout out to the hardest quality control tool of all, which is humans, right? So if you have a pull request and you show it to 10 different people, it's very likely they're going to have completely different feedback. And it's all pretty arbitrary. Like there's not an accepted set of rules by which somebody's going to give you feedback. It's super arbitrary. It's determined by their experience, what things that they have had happen in their history as a programmer that annoyed them the most. And that's probably going to drive their decision making and their preferences in terms of how you should do things. And this is, to some degree, this is also why some people kind of prefer the automated tools, that even if you set them to the highest maximum settings, yeah, it is quite painful, but at least it's kind of not, it takes a little bit of subjectivity out of it if you're willing to completely accept what the creators of the tools say. It takes some subjectivity out of code quality control, but obviously, like, it is a trade-off. So yeah, like TLDR, mild tools, for sure you should implement them. Medium spiciness tools, still you can implement them. It's not, such a big deal. Introduces a little bit of friction, but it's probably worth it. The really, really hot tools, the really spicy tools, yeah, it may not be worth it. Just like use your own judgment. So yeah, that's that. Never have a slow request. It's a good talk, but it was not, I don't know, to me there was not too much of anything new there. Um, Probably one thing that's kind of interesting. So Laravel has this new optimized command, and basically it's a shorthand for a whole bunch of things, like for example, config caching, route caching. There's like a couple of other things I forgot. But the really important thing is that you can actually hook into it with your own application, right? So if you can think about a new deploy of your application, and you might think, oh, what can I do? Like, what kind of caches can I warm up? Or what can I do to make sure the application is performing really fast? You can hook into this command, yeah, execute it on deploy, and then make sure that you're doing all of these things. And similarly, you can hook into the clear command, which is like the opposite. So it clears whatever caches you create. And then, yeah, there's like simple stuff like implement queuables, the should queue interface on mailables. Yeah, there was like a whole discussion on the Laravel GitHub, like should every mailable be queuable by default, yes or no? And yeah, apparently there's a lot of contradictory opinions about this. But so anyway, the speaker says, well, yeah, probably it should be the default. Why? Because there's basically never a reason not to use it. So opcache, yeah, just by turning on opcache, you can get a huge performance increase from every request. I actually had a look and we're already using opcache. I was very disappointed because I wanted the performance increase. But yeah, pretty simple stuff. PMing for devs. Yeah, this was a very interesting talk because it's not really technical talk. It's not really even about Laravel, but I really like this talk. I found it to be super, super useful. Once they do release the talks, like if there's one talk I can recommend, you just watch it. When they release it, it's probably going to be this one. So yeah, and a lot of it was really great slides. So I have a lot of slide excerpts in my slides. But yeah, basically, the talk is about engineers or developers. Like it may be controversial for some people, especially if they're more junior, if they're more on the junior end. Like I remember when I was more of a junior engineer, yeah, my kind of stance was that, well, I just want to receive requirements from someone, maybe product manager or project manager, scrum master, whatever else. But you never really want to, do anything outside of implementing requirements as an engineer. But yeah, of course, like as I progress through my career, I see things very differently now. An engineer's job is a lot more than fulfilling requirements. Even before AI came into the fold, I think that's, yeah, many people kind of really believe that. But yeah, this is kind of like the theme of the talk. The real job of an engineer is seeking out and understanding problems, right? That's the most important thing an engineer can do. Because in theory, anybody can implement things. Maybe some people it will take them longer. Maybe some people they'll have like a slightly suboptimal solution, but ultimately any number of people can implement something. But what's really, really difficult is to understand problems and figure out how do you actually solve those problems. And yeah, that means you have to talk to people, right? The thing that stereotypically engineers don't like doing, but it's the most important thing to do. So yeah, in general, you should be eager to talk to business stakeholders and just hear about problems. Yeah, the most important phrase of the whole talk was efficiently solve an ordered list of meaningful problems, right? So it's a big deal about this phrase. But yeah, anyway, so PM, in this case, it stands for product manager. So essentially, it's like why engineers should be more of a product manager. Yeah, but it's especially good like if you have, I don't know, your own idea, if you want to do your own startup, you want to build a product, I don't know, want to put something out there. I think this is like the perfect talk. But even if you work at a company like I do, I think it's equally important. Yeah, another thing he quoted is, yeah, so developers value their time at approximately minus $100 an hour, by Ben Orenstein. If you're wondering who this guy is, that's fine. I've never heard of him. But basically, I looked him up. He did like a really good talk at LaraconEU 2023. I actually started listening to this talk last night, but I just didn't have much time. So I listened to like the first 10 minutes of it. It was really interesting. So I'm going to finish watching it tonight. But he's talking about kind of like similar concepts, but it's basically about the value of engineering. Like as an engineer, what is the really valuable thing you should be doing as opposed to the not so valuable thing that you're probably doing. Yeah. Okay, so what's the context of this? So imagine you're working, whatever the situation is, you might be working for a company, you might be working for yourself, and you have like a really big new feature you want to build. Maybe it's like a new project in your platform or something like that, right? So you're always going to be in a situation of having something like this, right? You can't really see it. You can't see it so clearly as this, but this is always the case, right? So there's always the core requirements that are given to you. There's always some quick, meaningful wins, which is usually like small. It's not that much, but it's always there. Then there's the not so quick wins, right? There might be things that you do have to do, but they just take forever to do. And then I'm sure we've all had this, which is like, yeah, ambiguous ideas that might not be good. Somebody comes to you with a really bright idea. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we just did this? Or wouldn't it be nice if the platform did this? Wouldn't it be nice if we rewrote everything in Rust or whatever it might be the language of the day? Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we copied OpenAI and just did this? So anyway, ambiguous ideas, they're not necessarily bad, but they usually sound like they're not such a great idea. The problem is it usually takes a lot of time and effort to kind of test these ideas. You can't easily prototype them. You can't easily research them, but for sure they're there. Now, that's the situation of every single new feature, new project, new, I don't know, module, whatever major new thing you build. The problem is you're always going to have to, like imagine if this was a piece of paper, you always have to grab a pair of scissors and you have to cut it somewhere. But you don't know, like you don't see this neat boundaries and sections and things, but you're going to have to cut somewhere. So you have a little bit of everything in the final thing that you're actually implementing. And I guess the purpose, what you're going to want to try and do is you want to try and not spend so much time here. Definitely cover as much of this as possible, as little of that as possible. But mostly you want to spend the time here, which is difficult. And this is the most useful tool, right? So I think you made a point. So engineers have tools like Laravel, like Livewire, whatever, Kubernetes. Product managers, they just have one tool, and this is a tool, it's cutting. So you have to cut as much as possible out of the thing, especially like this kind of stuff, and leave the more meaningful kind of stuff. Yeah, so don't be a chihuahua. If you have scary problems, don't be scared by them. If the sales team comes at you with suggestions, don't attack them. Yeah, try and understand the problem. Yeah, instead be a truffle pig, roll around in the dirt, get dirty, talk to those dirty salespeople. And yeah, for sure, like try and get a handle on what is the actual problem you're trying to solve, and then try and think of a good solution. Yeah, how many times have you had somebody come to you and say something like this, right? Maybe you're like a team lead or something, you're a lead engineer, and you had somebody come to you and say, yeah, came up with this cool new feature, cool new abstraction, cool new library, cool new framework, whatever it is, we should refactor everything. It's going to solve all of our problems. Well, and yeah, probably the developer is well-intentioned when he says it as well. But yeah, the problem is, what is the actual problem that this solves? It probably doesn't solve any problem. So I say this like 100 times a week. This is probably my absolute catchphrase in meetings. But yeah, a little bit of a lowdown. So what kinds of problems might we encounter? The hypothetical problem, that's like the really classic one. So if somebody comes to you and they say this, like, let's do this cool new thing, what are they trying to solve? They're trying to solve a hypothetical problem, right? They're going to say, it'll help us scale, it'll, I don't know, make us work faster, it'll do X, Y, Z. But probably it's not a real problem that real users have. So the point here is don't solve non-problems, right? Solve real problems for real users. Yeah, the world has way too many real problems. Let's not make up any new ones. Let's not work on hypothetical problems. So make sure whatever it is you're doing, whatever work you're deciding to do, you're solving real actual problems that real actual users face. Could be a customer, it could be a partner, it could be whoever it is that you're working for. You should be solving real problems real customers have. Don't solve hypothetical problems because somebody thinks something might be a problem later down the track, in a year, whatever. Trivial problems. So trivial problems, they're a little bit more complicated. The definition of a trivial problem is it causes a small amount of pain for a small amount of people. It may be more accurate to say a small proportion of the users of the system, but you get the point. So inevitably, you're going to have these problems. And as engineers, we kind of want to, make the perfect system, kind of like the Matrix. You want to build a perfect system that executes perfectly. Everybody's really happy. Like, I'm going to be that guy that makes it perfect. Yeah, the problem is very, very often, especially like non-tech business stakeholders, they'll complain to you and say, oh, if only there was a button to do this, or if only you had this kind of report, or you had this or whatever else. But in reality, it might take them 30 seconds or something to work around the problem. It might be like 1 out of every 100 users that has the problem. Every single platform in the world has trivial problems, unless you're like, I don't know, Facebook or something, or Atlassian, and you can hire 10,000 engineers to work on every single trivial problem. Yeah, the recommendation is don't work for it. It could be good in like very, very small doses. So for example, let's say you have a bad relationship with like a business team or a business unit, right? Okay, you can maybe solve like 2 trivial problems a month for them. It might improve their morale. It might improve your relationship with these people. But in general, you don't really want to spend your time working on trivial problems. Gravity problem. So this is my favorite one. Yeah, so somebody comes to you, like imagine you are running Facebook or Twitter or something. Somebody comes to you, they say, people are mean on the internet. Can you solve this problem? Can you implement some, I don't know, filter or blocking feature or something? So a gravity problem is a type of problem which is not really solvable, right? Somebody comes to you, they say, I want this request to take 5 milliseconds. Okay, like, I'm sorry, that's never gonna happen. So a gravity problem is just simply a problem. It is a real problem, but it's just not a solvable problem. So it's either not possible to solve, or it's gonna take so much time and so many resources to solve, it's probably gonna drive your company to bankruptcy. So yeah, identify these problems early. Don't waste any time on them. Don't solve non-solvable problems. Cool. So those are the 3 big ones. The other thing is, yeah, problem is not a feature request. So imagine somebody comes to you and they say, oh, you know what, it would be really great if you can add this feature to the platform. That's not a problem, right? They're already giving you the solution. Don't take solutions, especially from non-techie people. Even like literally in the last week, I've had somebody come to me and say, oh, who should I contact about this? Like, how do I do this thing? And I say, why are you doing this thing? And actually, yeah, they were doing like a completely incorrect workflow. So it's really important to understand what is the actual problem the user is experiencing, why are they experiencing that problem. You, as the engineering team or engineer, you should be the one to actually come up with a solution to that problem. Don't let other people, don't let your customers, your business stakeholders dictate to you what is the actual solution, what's the feature. And yeah, directly related to this, probably it should be at some point, to be fair. But yeah, so there's basically another thing, which is the zero-sum war of, like, it's a trade-off tug of war of customizability versus universality. And what does that mean? So again, I'm sure many people, you've had this situation. Maybe you're working for a client, you're working on a product for a company, right? You might hear something like, okay, we have this, business partners, we have these clients, they want to do X, Y, Z. I'll give you like an example. I guess many years ago, I worked on a booking manifest system, right? So we had to run a manifest of people booking on something. Sounds very generic, and for sure the client wanted it to be built generically. However, their use case was very specific. They were running a skydiving business. So they wanted to build a manifesting system where people make bookings to go on skydives, right? So they had a lot of features which were kind of very specific to their use case of skydiving, but at the same time, they wanted to resell this platform to other companies, right? Companies that might be, for example, booking people on a bus tour or on a cruise tour or something like that, which is, it sounds tangentially very similar. They're both touristy activities where you have to book a person onto something, but then, inevitably, something you kind of have to accept is whenever you try and build a system that's custom for many different business use cases, that's universal, but then also you have somebody kind of giving you custom requirements just for their type of business, just for their use case, whatever it might be. It's not really possible to balance both, right? So this is like a really, really big, what do you call it? Like it's a conundrum, but it's a fallacy, right? It's a fallacy of programming that you can build like a perfectly universal system for something, and also you can customize it for like this specific use case or this specific use case, right? Or, we have this partner XYZ, they're our most important partner, we have to look after them. Let's just do these 3 things for them, right? How often do you hear this? Yeah, I've heard it like a million times in my career. It always happens. I guess what you have to be doing is you have to be really mindful. You have to tell your whatever business stakeholders like, hey, this is actually not possible. So we can't equally build perfectly universal system and also have all of these customizations for whatever you want. So you have to pick one or the other. You have to force them to pick one or the other. Which is more important? Well, I don't know. It depends on the business, right? Depends on the business needs. There's not an answer for which you should do, but it's just the point is you have to accept that you can't do both. You can't equally do both perfectly. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point.
Why don't we account for Swedish taxes?
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is yeah, that's just a general business prioritization problem, but it's very true. And yeah, finally, if you've solved a problem, once you've solved a problem, move on, right? Don't linger around. Don't think, oh, maybe we can like add this and that and the other thing. You solve a problem, move on, right? Let it out into the wild. Let users test it. Let them give you feedback on it. But don't don't get into development hell working on a problem for a long period of time. And yeah, finally, just cut more. So the more you cut, where's the knife? The more you cut from here, the more you can do, and hopefully the really good stuff. Cool. PHP Unit 13, going pretty good for time. All right, so yeah, PHP Unit 13, I think has just been released like in the last week, if I'm not mistaken. So the author of PHP Unit was there. For sure, he got a big round of applause, and then he said, "Oh, you guys shouldn't be clapping. Like, just wait until you see this thing." So yeah, I think apparently he said a lot of things are actually removed from PHP Unit. Why? I don't know. Maybe to make it more streamlined, to remove like weird edge cases in situations. There's a lot of like, from my perspective, there's a lot of kind of almost enterprisey things or features that let you kind of dig deeper into what's happening. So for instance, there's like this new distinction between a large and a small test, right? In the code coverage report, it'll tell you, is this code covered by a large test or a small test? It has different shades of color for it. You might think, well, what's the difference between a large and small tests? So a small test is like probably your classical definition of a unit test. It tests just one thing really well. A large test is more like an integration test, where it tests like maybe a whole endpoint, and also conversely, maybe like 10 services that are called within that endpoint to achieve 10 different things, right? That's like a large test. Ideally, you will have both, right? Ideally, you want to test each of your services, like what they do. Like A plus, you test the route and whether it accomplishes what it's supposed to accomplish. Yeah, you can also find all tests which involve a certain class and run those tests based on the class that you want to test. And I don't mean like the test class, I mean the actual class in your code that you want to be testing. There's a lot of detailed output and deprecations. So yeah, apparently a lot of deprecation output, even if it's like imagine you're using one of 100 packages and something in that package, the author deprecated, like you probably don't know. unless you're using that public API directly in an IDE, and the IDE kind of crosses it out like PHP Storm. So it can actually tell you all of these things as you're running unit tests. And I guess similarly, like if you use a static analyzer, like PHP Stand, they can create like a baseline file, meaning whatever problems it might flag, you can create the baseline so that it doesn't tell you every time. So it just scans new code. So very similar. It's going to have a baseline for deprecations. Yeah, new config CLI command to generate config. That's not very controversial. So it basically just asks you a whole bunch of questions, and it creates what they call a best practice configuration file. Sorry, one sec. And yeah, finally, well, this is not really like a update, but yeah, since they went to event-driven architecture, I think it was like PHP Unit 10, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, a lot of people have written a lot of extensions for it. Consequently, a lot of those extensions made their way into PHP Unit directly, and so they've kind of added them into their core code base since version 13. For example, you have the slow test detector. API framework. So I'm not sure how many people heard about this one, but basically there's this Symfony project which has existed for some time, which is called it's like something like Symfony API framework. Basically, it's been kind of tightly bound to Symfony. What they've done now is that they've extracted like let's say its core functionality into packages. Well, I think it already was in packages, but they've tried to make like a separation between that and the Symfony aspect of it. And now they've added support for Laravel. So you kind of get the benefit of approximately like 90% feature compatibility, they said. And it integrates with, all of the Laravel stuff like routes, models, guards, policies, this kind of thing. No, this is a separate thing. Yeah. You've probably never heard of this. I've never heard of it, but you can look it up if you want. The way to think of it, like if you've ever heard of Amos or Amios, I think Amios is kind of like a e-commerce framework, right? It's like a whole framework on top of PHP, and then it has bindings for many different frameworks, including Laravel, but many others in PHP. So this is kind of similar, right? They have a lot of core API functionality that they've built over time, and now they've integrated that with Laravel. So it seems like quite a big, very heavy project. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you're doing like an enterprise API project, it might actually be helpful, right? I'm not sure because I've never used it, but for sure I'm gonna like check it out and see how it is. Maybe I'll even do a talk on it at some point. Yeah, they say like they have support for different types of APIs, for example, REST, GraphQL. They also have a support for different JSON formats to return with. So it does seem like they have quite a lot of functionality going into it. I guess, again, on the downside, it seems like it's quite a big framework on top of Laravel. And it might be like, I guess you're kind of fixed into using that. So for instance, we use Eloquent query filter, right, to filter some models. We wouldn't be able to do that if you use this because they have their own kind of filtering functionality. So you kind of have to use their functionality for everything if you use it. You don't have much of an opportunity to customize it. That's the kind of vibe that I get from it. That may not be a bad thing, I'm not sure, but yeah, something worthwhile playing with. Yeah, one kind of interesting thing is that, yeah, one of the questions that they had is from the audience is, do they support API versioning? So, you have like V1, 2, 3, you have your API. And yeah, the speaker said, well, no, actually, they're pretty against API versioning, which I found kind of interesting. Yeah, but they said you should like kind of like retire or deprecate endpoints and just make new ones, which I don't know. It sounds a little bit funny to me. Like within the context of business or enterprise, like if you have partners, not end user customers, like obviously if you're only ever consuming your own API, yeah, maybe you can do that. But if you have partners consuming your APIs, you can't just like deprecate endpoints and tell your partners it's not going to work after X date, and that's really going to piss them off. So So I'm not sure that's such a good idea. So I think in that kind of enterprisey sense, API versioning is actually really good. And like if you look at, I don't know, any payment service providers like Stripe or IDN or PayPal, whatever else, like for sure they use API versioning precisely for this use case. So it's a little bit weird, I don't know, but one to check out for sure. Cool, miscellaneous. So a few different things. Yeah, so obviously there were a lot of people in the Laravel team at the conference. There's a lot of different updates. I'm just going to try and run through them fairly quickly. Yeah, first of all, so I guess a little bit of good news. If you are using Laravel, you'll be happy to know there's like approximately 30% in growth year on year on new installs, meaning for sure it seems like a lot more people are using it. Yeah, why is Laravel so successful? So I think increasingly the kind of goal of the whole product is that it's going to be an ecosystem built for productivity. So the whole point is, yeah, productivity. Build stuff, build it quickly, build it well, but up to enterprise level support. One thing Taylor said is that, yeah, Laravel version may be entering 12.0, but in many ways it feels like up until this point it was 1.0. So this is like a new chapter for Laravel now. They have obviously quite a lot of funding. I think it's like 50, $60 million, quite a lot of money, USD. So like obviously they have a lot of very big plans. Yeah, the goal is to make every aspect of developing with Laravel really phenomenal, from starting up a project all the way through to running it in production, right? And they want to reposition Laravel to be the default choice for building new full stack applications. So you kind of see this shift from being a backend focused framework to just being a full stack solution. So whatever front end you want to do, yeah, they want to be the framework that you start to build it with. Yeah, so Laravel should be the default choice for all web development. That's the goal. PHP.NET. So one of the things they're going to do is ensure that anybody can get PHP up and running in 1 minute or less on any operating system. Inertia 2.0, so obviously that's been announced. The Laravel team actually acquired Inertia as of last week, so this would be like 3 weeks ago, I guess. And yeah, obviously it's like a really major part of the Laravel cell. And so bringing this library in-house to be developed by the Laravel team. They're going to be releasing Flux, which is design templates for Laravel. There's going to be a new website for Laravel on the 24th. So a whole bunch of things are coming out next week. Laravel 12, zero breaking changes call. Relatively minor release, however, there will be a few goodies, including, yeah, there will be Nightwatch released. There will be these new starter kits released. So what's a starter kit? Essentially, you can start with a skeleton app, or you can pick your own front-end framework, right? So you can use React, Vue, or Livewire. And you can pick and choose one of these things. Like think of it as you get a CLI tool. It'll prompt you like, okay, what do you want? What front-end framework do you want? What do you want to do? Whatever else, and then it generates the starter kit for you.
So you're going to, it's no longer included as part of Laravel app. So depending on the starter kit you choose, it'll get what you want. So if you want freeze with use and or or React, and then you can also get a lot of the dashboards now incorporated with your favorite front end. So you can customize the way the dashboards are for a lot of the side apps. So you can have like React dashboard with the menu at the top or at the side. Things like that.
Probably I should have given you a microphone.
I think 12's now out like
Yeah, I think I heard they're all being released on the 24th, but I don't know. Could be that they're like out, soft launch out. And yeah, the other thing is, of course, so Laravel Cloud, that's also going live on the 24th. There was a little bit of a preview on pricing. I didn't want to dwell on it too much, but basically, like the basic plan starts at $0, and you just pay for the as-you-go usage. And the idea is that, like, let's say you want to develop an application. Yeah, when you're testing it, you're going to keep your servers running, but when you're not, like, you can just pause everything and there's no cost. Or it might be like a very, very marginal storage cost, but not all that much. And then for the paid plans, like, yeah, you get $20. Sorry, it costs $20 for the base plan. I guess that's like one website. And yeah, it comes with many, many features. It also comes with discounts for that, pay-as-you-go usage. And then, yeah, business and enterprise, it's a contact sales. So it's probably for the bigger use cases. Cool. So yeah, I think we're kind of getting towards the end of it. So yeah, again, Taylor said that, yeah, historically Laravel has been really great for mid-market companies. And yeah, of course, while they want to double down on that use case, but they also want to reposition Laravel to be more enterprise ready. So not only for the mid-level, mid-market, but also right up to the enterprise, right up to the biggest companies. And actually, it's really interesting. On the new Laravel website, they're going to list like some of the really big Fortune 500 companies that are using Laravel. And yeah, you might be surprised. It's like NASA, SpaceX, like a whole bunch. Netflix, yeah. So yeah, it's perhaps maybe it's not surprising, but it is used by quite a lot of companies. Yeah, so I think the idea is that they want Laravel to be used for a project of any size. So it could be like a very small hobby project, could be a business project, could be like an enterprise use case. They want to cater to everybody. I think now, obviously, the work is in trying to cater more to enterprise scale users, so to build things for them. And yeah, to some extent, Laravel Cloud is going to be a solution which is meant to cater for that as well. Yeah, so they're not really sure. So why is Laravel 12.0 like a smaller release, right? At the moment, yeah, they do feel like Laravel is fairly feature complete. Like, it's not clear what, if anything, Laravel needs. But yeah, over time, big ideas, they tend to emerge, right? There will be new software development patterns. There will be new things. And yeah, as time goes on, yeah, they'll probably think of other things to add. But it's going to be like quite organic versus, I think previously they were just kind of building a lot of functionality that was requested. I think nowadays, it's fair enough to say, I think it's a little bit more mature than it used to be. And yeah, lastly, I think this is the second last point, but this is really good for us. It's really good for everybody, which is one of the things that Laravel company wants to use with their new funding is actually just to help support the community, help to support the Laravel and PHP community. What does it mean? Well, okay. Yeah, what's coming for meetups? They really want to support and sponsor meetups. So Laravel, like the Laravel company, will formally sponsor meetups around the world. As the first part of that is they're going to send these meetup kits. I'm not really sure exactly what's in it, but yeah, for sure, I think I'll get one. Might be like, I don't know, stickers, maybe some swag. They're also going to sponsor meetups, maybe. Yes? You want some of the stickers? Yeah, funding. Well, exactly. So they want to sponsor meetups. They're saying to begin with, they probably sponsor like one meetup a year for each group. So one per group per year. If it doesn't cost that much, maybe two, but I think it depends. Probably the Australian cost will be a lot more than like somewhere in India or South America. So it's unlikely we're going to get more than one, but you get the idea. So basically, they just want to help meetups get off the ground, get going, especially in like new cities which maybe haven't had it in the past. Yeah, so separate to Laracon, this is not really related to Laravel, but yes, there's the new PHP X thing, which I've already kind of shown you guys. So I think that'll help with discoverability. The other thing that the Laravel guys are doing with the new website, they're going to have like a section for upcoming meetups, right? So they're going to directly promote meetups around the world. So I think between that and this thing, that's going to help engineers find their local meetups much easier than they have been able to in the past, which I think is actually one of the biggest hurdles to get through. Yeah. Cool. So that's basically it for the Laracon stuff. There's one more thing I wanted to mention, which is really cool. So they had this unconference, and I don't know who's heard of the unconference idea. Nobody? I've never like seen it during an actual conference, funnily enough, but basically the concept is So you have the main conference happening. In this particular building, it had like, I don't know, 4 levels or something. So at the final level, they didn't really need it for the conference. So they have this unconference going. And so you have this kind of like, well, in this case, it's just a piece of paper. Could be like a chalkboard. But anybody can just come and they can just list themselves down, right? So let's say you want to do a talk on anything, doesn't matter what it is. I mean, ideally like Laravel or PHP related, but anybody can nominate themselves to do a talk, like a lightning talk, think of it that way, like 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you can discuss anything you like. And this is the schedule, and you just put yourself as the next slot in the schedule if you want to talk about something. So at the 4th floor, people just come and yeah, they can hear you talk. So it's very kind of ad hoc. It's not centrally organized by anybody, and nobody picks the talks. Like anybody can just write their talk here and do a talk. And yeah, why might people want to go there? Well, yeah, of course, if you've been to a conference, not every single talk is necessarily very interesting or very useful, or maybe it just doesn't apply to you, to your work. So yeah, instead you can go to this thing and it might be a lot more interesting, might be a lot more technical. So yeah, I think it was, and this is what it kind of looks like. It's for sure, it's not a lot of people. There might be like, I don't know, 500, 700 people at the conference, but there's only like 10, 20 people here. So not that many, but if you want an alternative experience, yeah, this is it. And yeah, I did find it's quite interesting. And that's actually the last slide. Cool. Ah, yes, there was. There was actually like a whole talk on Livewire, but I didn't have it in my notes. But for sure, yeah, for sure there was. What the prize is? Oh, okay, yeah. So there were a few. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, there were like the sponsors. So maybe that's one of them. Actually, I don't have like a photo here, but I won like a really big box from MongoDB, and I was really excited, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out what was inside. It was like I don't know, like a butt pillow or something. I'm just guessing, or maybe something for your hands to keep your hands level on a desk. Yeah, like there were definitely some prizes. I don't think there was anything crazy like drones. There were definitely some, I don't know, PHP elephants, some random gadgets, a lot of like clothing and things like that. Yeah, another interesting thing, again, I didn't really have it in the slides, but they had a Mario Kart competition, which was played like in the intermission in between the different talks. And it was basically like everybody gets just precisely one turn, and whoever has the highest score wins. I didn't even bother because I never played Mario Kart, but for sure, like somebody won some pretty big trophy. If you're coming from overseas, I'm not sure how you would even carry it home, but yeah, they had a lot of fun stuff like that. But it's not like, you know, crazy prizes like a $1,000 drone or anything like that. Cool. Any more questions? Sweet. All right. In that case, yeah, thank you very much. And just enjoy the rest of the pizza, the beer, and yeah, we can chat for a bit, and we can probably leave at about 8.